Acropolis, which means city. So Acropolis means the highest point of the city. You have words in your language with the word acron, acrobat, acrophobia, acron, high point, high end. So, the hill though was not the highest hill of Athens, but the hill had a natural spring with drinkable water, and that's why this hill was inhabited very early, in the late Stone Age. The archaeologists during the excavations have found remains of the late Stone Age, dwellings and pottery, vases of clay. So we are certain that the hill was inhabited so early. That is 6,500 years ago. It seems that later on the people who lived in the city understood that the hill was really naturally fortified because this hill was steep, inaccessible from three sides. The only accessible side was the west one. Even nowadays the visitors go up from the west side. On the summit of the hill was a small plateau, a natural platform, proper for building houses, and from the summit of this hill the Athenians could control and supervise all the plain. They could see the sea. There was not this huge city in those times, but a plain, land, proper for cultivations. But what happened? The houses were up, the land was down, up and down all the time. It seems that it was quite tiring to the people. And gradually, in the course of the historical period, they abandoned the hill and they built the houses around the foot of the hill where Plaka area is today. The hill was converted into a religious center, and I have already told you that it served as a religious center and a fortress. In case of a sudden war, the people went up to be protected, and during the great festivals in honor of the goddess Athena, they went up, they were closed into the walls of the city to they went up to honor the goddess Athena. And I would like to mention the festival of Panathenia, because Phidias, the great sculptor, immortalized this festival in the interior frieze of the Parthenon. The festival took place every 4 years. The last day of the festival, the Athenians in a procession went up to the Acropolis, transporting the peplos, the sacred garment, to the goddess. This peplos this sacred garment was a piece of cloth like a long veil. It depicted the war of the gods and the giants, that is a scene from the Greek mythology. And the peplos, this veil, was transported up here as the sail of a boat. So everybody should marvel at the fine needlework of the peplos. And when they reached the Acropolis, they went to the Erechtheion, not to the Parthenon, but to the Erechtheion, to the other temple, and they wrapped with the veil an old statue of the goddess Athena. And this great festival was immortalized by Phidias in the interior frieze of the Parthenon. This frieze can be seen in the new museum of the Acropolis, part of it in the new museum, part of it in British Museum taken by Lord Elgin. Now, the buildings that you will see today on the top of the hill were all built in the 5th century before Christ. Within 50 years, they needed only 50 years to build this magnificent building, and the material was the marble. The marble had to be transported from far away from the Penteli mountain. The marble quarries were on the Penteli mountain, and this mountain is about 16 kilometers away from the city. I have some plans from Dr. Kores' book, Dr. Kores, the chief archaeologist here. And he describes how the Athenians transported the marble from the Penteli mountain to the Acropolis hill. So we know that they used wooden sleighs to have the marble down. They used oxen and wheel carriages to draw the huge pieces of marble, but the oxen couldn't go up this steep hill, and they used mules. Do you know the mules? You have an expression, stubborn as a mule. We have the same expression. Aristotle, the famous philosopher, in a later period of course, he wrote that the Athenians let free the mules that had worked too hard, because they estimated the work of the animals. And he wrote a story about a mule that it was let free, but the next day the animal went voluntarily to be united with the others. Obviously the animal was used to do the same hard work for years. But you know, we have an expression in our language for the old people, the pensioners who like to be creative, to go back to work. We call them the mules of Aristotle, because of this story that Aristotle wrote. So you know now how the Athenians transported the marble. And if you ask me why all the buildings were built in the 5th century before Christ, I'll answer because of the Persians. Ladies and gentlemen, the first buildings, the earlier buildings that were built on the Acropolis hill were made of wood. The wood is an impermanent material. In the time of the tyrants built the first monumental buildings on the Acropolis hill, the first stone buildings and buildings made of marble. Always the tyrants want to build impressive buildings to gain the favor of the people. So one of the tyrants, Pisistratus, built the earliest temple dedicated to the goddess Athena, the earliest stone temple dedicated to the goddess Athena, and the first entrance, the first propylea. But all these buildings were destroyed by King Xerxes and the Persians. In the bus I've told you about the Marathon battle. This Marathon battle took place in 490 before Christ. The Persians fled, the city was saved, but they didn't forget, and 10 years later on they came again to attack Greece. They came from the north this time, and they were under the commands of King Xerxes, the son of King Darius. Leading a numerous army, Xerxes managed to pass through the Straits of Dardanelles. It was the first time in the history of the world that an army made a bridge using the boats. He placed the boats one next to the other, and the army passed through the Straits of Dardanelles. Do you know where these straits are? In Turkey nowadays, the straits that separate Asia from Europe. Anyway, they managed to pass through the Straits of Dardanelles, and after many adventures, King Xerxes reached Thermopylae. Have you heard of this word, Thermopylae? The Battle of Thermopylae. It was the easy entrance to southern Greece, some straits between the mountains and the sea. The Greeks knew that. They knew that King Xerxes and his numerous armies should pass through the Straits of Thermopylae because he wanted to come to Athens, to attack Athens. And the Greeks waited there under the leadership of Leonidas, king of Sparta, a brave man, a man of great intelligence, who had understood that there was no hope for victory there, and he sent the other Greeks away. Only the 300 Spartans and 700 soldiers from another city, from Thespiae, refused to go, and they stayed to defend Thermopylae. Have you watched the movie, The 300? This is the story. I didn't like the movie, I'll tell you why. The directors, probably wishing to attract spectators, they presented the Persians like monsters. They were not monsters. Herodotus, the father of history, wrote that no Greek could listen to the word Persian without feeling terror, which means that the Greeks were afraid of the Persians, first of all because the Persians were numerous, and second because they had weapons of the last technology. They were brave men and they had weapons of the last technology in those times. Anyway, there is a very nice historical dialogue between King Xerxes, king of Persia, and King Leonidas, king of Sparta. King Xerxes sent emissaries to Leonidas to ask for the land and the water, to give the land and the water, to surrender. And Leonidas' answer was, "Molon lave, come and take them." King Xerxes said, "We are so many that if we throw our arrows, we are going to shade the sun." And Leonidas said, "Never mind, we'll fight under the shade." But there was a traitor among the Greeks, and this traitor showed the secret path to the Persians. The Persians managed to surround the Greeks, and the Greeks died all in Thermopylae. A historical battle. After this battle, in which Leonidas and his soldiers lost their lives, King Xerxes entered Athens. He totally destroyed the city, the first serious catastrophe of the city in 480 before Christ. And he destroyed the early temples on the Acropolis. To be fair, I have to mention that the Persians found the city evacuated from the population. The Athenians, wishing to protect the women and the children, had sent them to the near islands, to Aegina and Salamis, and only some old Athenians were the defenders of the fortress. Have you heard of the Oracle of Delphi? Have you been in Delphi? Maybe some of you. There was a sanctuary of the god Apollo, and a priestess of the god, a prophetess, who gave the oracles about the future, the prophecies about the future. Not only individuals went there to find out about the future, but also the city-states sent emissaries to the oracle to ask about this and that. So the Athenians, terrified, sent emissaries to the oracle of Delphi to ask Pythia how they could defeat the Persians. And Pythia gave a really strange oracle. She said only